All right. I think we're both here. Well, welcome in. I'm like double checking now. Like I have PTSD from this time. So welcome in to episode 19, but actually episode 1 of what I'm officially deciding. We decided it this morning. We're deciding we're going to call this the Fit Parent Podcast. So this will be the first episode with the new name, and we're going to do fun thing. I don't know. The Dependable Dad podcast wasn't quite fitting what we're doing, and so we're going to go with Fit Parent, and we're going to not overthink it. We're just going to go with it, and that's maybe there's a fitness lesson in there somewhere, I'm sure. Like, don't overthink it, just start.
And it's a goal for me. Like, you will be a fit parent.
Mm-hmm.
Keep doing it.
Just
You'll
keep
get there.
going. So, as you hear, this is Amy back for her third episode that we've recorded, her second one that you will ever hear. Again, we will revisit that topic. I wanted to do it today, but I'm gonna need more space from it so I don't get into the Twilight Zone where I think that I said all the same thing. So we are recording. I have loved having Amy on. Hopefully you've liked doing it, and hopefully the people who are listening have enjoyed it. The 4 or 5 of you thus far, but again, we do things early so that we can figure them out, and so this is what we're doing.
It's been a long time so far.
Yeah. So I told Amy we are going to start a series. So I really enjoyed the series that we did with Remy, which was how to build your workout program. That was 3 parts. This series is going to be 7 parts. We are buckling up. So this is going to be on the hierarchy of fat loss. Okay, so when we're talking about fat loss, there are things that we need to do to in order to achieve that, and that is the goal of many people listening. It is not the universal goal of fitness. Not saying that this should be your goal, but if your goal is fat loss, this is for you. If your goal is really anything else, 90% of this series is going to be for you, because 90% of the things that you do for fat loss are the same things that you do for maintenance, that you do for general health, that you do for muscle gain. Like, almost everything is exactly the same. Today's episode is going to be the only thing that is different between fat loss and every other fitness goal. Everything else, numbers 2 through 7 on this list, are going to be true regardless of your goal. Those are all good things to do, and their order of importance probably stays about the same. What we're going to talk about today, the strategies that we're going to talk about today, though, are still relevant regardless of your goal. You will just adapt them accordingly. So, where I want to kind of dive in is one, I'll go through the hierarchy of fat loss. I'll do this at the top of every one of the episodes in this, and then we're going to go just episode by episode. We're going to go through each of these 7. We're going to talk about what it is, why it's important, why it falls in the place on the hierarchy that it does, and some strategies for how to accomplish it, whatever it happens to be. So,
Sounds good to me.
Gonna dive in there. Had something else I was gonna say. I don't remember. We're just gonna go.
It'll come to you in the middle of another thought.
Yes, it just came to me. So this is what it is. So the reason why there's a hierarchy of this, and the reason why we're gonna do it, is we're gonna try to dispel some myths, because the common theme is, what do I need to do and how do I need to do it? And the thought is, I have to do everything all at once. And oftentimes that can feel overwhelming, daunting, and like we can't actually do it. And if one of those things falls by the wayside for whatever reason, like for instance, I had a client last week get into a car accident and break her arm.
Oh, goodness.
She's doing okay, but like she got in a car accident and broke her arm. That's a bummer for her, right? So working out is going to take very much a back seat for her. And we're gonna be able to adapt and bring some stuff back in over the course of her recovery, but she's 6 weeks from being able to use both hands. Or even today, your husband in there with a thing, and he's got to do everything with one arm.
He couldn't
He
do
jacked
anything.
up his finger, and so he's only can use one hand really for most of the stuff, and so it can feel frustrating, and it can feel like, all right, well, what's the point? I had a client message me this morning who has her whole family has either a cold or flu or whatever it is, right? Just is sick, and has been, and it can feel discouraging because it's like I can't really do anything, and so sometimes some of these things are hard to accomplish. Working out is usually the first thing at the top of the list, particularly for parents. The schedule doesn't work. I can't make it happen today, whatever. And we can feel like we're not making progress because we're not doing the obvious things. And we need to recognize where things fall on the list of importance and the progress that we can make. Even if we can't hit all 7, we can still make great progress hitting 4 or 5 of the others. And we also want to focus on these in the order of importance, because we oftentimes get this backward. Or maybe not entirely backward, but we do start with some of the things at the bottom. And you'll understand what I mean in a second. So
I'm excited. I'm really curious about this.
The hierarchy of fat loss is number 1, and what we're going to spend most of our day talking about is you have to be in a calorie deficit. We'll talk about what that means for this whole episode, so I'm not even going to dive into it right now. So number 1 is a calorie deficit, the amount of calories you're eating. Number 2 is eating enough protein. And we'll talk about why that is. But if you're in a calorie deficit and you're eating enough protein, you will lose fat, regardless of everything else on this list. Those 2 things. If you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. Depends on how it's broken down. Protein, then you're going to lose fat. Number 3 is fiber. This is skipped over by so many people, but it's how much fiber, 1, for your general health, and 2, for your ability to stick with the top 2 items. Okay? If you're eating enough fiber, you are going to stay more full. This comes in the form of fruits, vegetables, complex carbohydrates. A lot of times have these. It's going to help you stay full longer. You're going to be able to stay in your calorie deficit. And also, like your general health, super important to eat enough fiber. Have a whole episode on fiber. I'm like...
A whole episode on fiber. I'm real excited.
Whole episode on fiber. Like your boy, I've been digging deep into the research on fiber. That's going to be a fun one. That's going to be we're going to name that one "Eat Your Damn Vegetables." That's what we're gonna eat a vegetable. That's what you're gonna call that episode. Number 4 is daily movement, usually measured in the form of steps or walking. Okay, but that is general movement, not exercise, or the fancy word for it you've probably heard me say before is NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the calories that you burn by not exercising, opening a car door, for instance. Number 5 is strength training. That means lifting weights. This is different from working out with weights. Okay, lifting weights is oh wait, I skipped number. I already did it wrong. What a turd. I'm the worst. All right, I'm gonna fix it here. So 3 is fiber. I did that right. I skipped number 4, which is super important, is sleep. Number 4 is sleep. So getting enough sleep.
Like, yeah, sleep is nice. Yeah,
it is nice, right? So you have one older kid who can do it on their own. I have 3 kids, 3.5 and under. Sleep is for the weak in my head right now. Like, that's what I have to tell myself, but it is super important. Again, so number 1 is calorie deficit. Number 2 is protein. Number 3 is fiber. Number 4 is sleep. Number 5 is daily movement. Number 6 is strength training, and number 7 is cardio.
See, I
now
always
you
think
see
of
what I'm saying.
Eating first.
Yes.
Well,
now you see what I'm saying.
I did think of it as being first before you and I started chatting.
Yes, but that is the common thing. Like, what am I going to do to lose weight? I'm going to start running again. right? I'm gonna go take some boot camp classes or body combat, which again, there's nothing wrong with any of that. Nothing wrong with any of that. But that is 7th on the list of
Yeah.
importance
Yep.
in terms of making progress towards your fat loss. And so we will get to that. However, that does not mean that it's not important. That doesn't mean that it's not incredibly good for you, for your health, all of this kind of, but in terms
Right.
of bang for your buck, if you can't go for a run, you can still lose a lot of fat. If you can't lift weights, you can still lose a lot of fat doing the things I listed above. So today we are going to dive in to number 1 on the list. Has to happen, otherwise you won't lose fat. Calorie deficit. Calorie deficit is the fancy industry term for you are burning more calories than you're consuming. Okay? And so we're going to dive into some of the nuts and bolts here, but what is it? How do we know if we're in one? Okay? And this is not necessarily going to be Jeff telling you to count your calories. All right? That is not what I'm going to get into here. However, that is a component of it if you want to go that direction. So there are 2 sides to a calorie deficit. I want to start with the calories that you're burning and knowing how do I get into a deficit. The other side of it is the calories that you're eating, and that's going to be more on the strategy side of things. With the calories that you're burning, this is to some degree a fixed number. Not entirely, and some of it we can talk about. That's the later stuff. Down numbers 5, 6, and 7 are going to be your movement. That's going to be kind of how you increase it. All right, but we've done a whole thing about the calories that you burn. This is the word that people use to describe this is your metabolism. Okay, people don't understand what the heck they're talking about when they talk about metabolism. My metabolism's broken. My metabolism slowed down. It didn't slow down. You slowed down. You stopped moving. That's what happens. Okay. Everybody's like, oh man, when I was in high school, I just could eat anything. Well, it's like also, yeah, you were a teenager, so like you could talk about you were a teenager, but you like my soccer girls that train with me, like those girls run like 6 miles a practice. They just run for 3 hours. That's just what they do. And they do it all the time, and they do it for fun, right? They're just constantly moving. And so they're just burning a gajillion calories. They just are. And so your metabolism doesn't slow down until after 50, and then it's a lot slower, unless there's something strange happen, right? There's exceptions to everything. But it's a lot slower than people think that it is. Okay? The calories that you're burning...
Sedentary.
What's that?
We just become more sedentary because of our
100%.
jobs.
Yeah. Think about your day. Like, think about what do you do in a day? Like, even if you go work out, right? Like, get up, I work out, and then I go and I sit at my desk, and I sit at my desk all day. And then I sit in my car to drive home, and then I come home, and I sit at my dinner table, and I have dinner, and then I sit on the couch, and I watch Netflix, and then I go to bed. Like, how much did you move?
A lot of sitting.
A lot of sitting, not a lot of movement. So that's one thing. But breaking down metabolism, taking a step back. 70% of the calories that you burn in the day is what's called your basal metabolic rate, which are the calories that you burn just by existing. If you were in a vegetative state, these are the calories that you would burn. These are based on how big you are. So we talked about this a little bit in our last episode, talking about why it's more challenging for women than it is for men to lose weight, because women are generally smaller than men. So how do you combat this? We talked about this last week. Quiz. Do you remember? Did you pay attention? How do you combat this?
I don't pay attention to much.
No, yeah, you're just here. Yeah, it's just gone. Build more muscle. Build more muscle. That's what you do. That's the only thing that you can do to increase your basal metabolic rate. Yeah. Because if you have more muscle, you are going to burn more calories just by existing. Okay? So build more muscle. So that's where strength training and all, like this is going to be a little bit cyclical. But some of this is just genetic. That's the genetic component of it. Some people are going to burn more calories than other people. That's just kind of the nature of it. And it's usually based on your size. 15% is that NEAT. That's the calories that you burn through other activity throughout the day. 10% is going to be the thermal effect of food, or literally the calories you burn to digest food. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the protein and fiber side of things. But in general, the more protein and fiber you eat, the more calories you're going to burn through the thermal effect of food. And 5% is the calories that you burn through exercise. which again is why strength training, and cardio are at the bottom of the list
Yeah.
of things. Now, it doesn't. Now that number, that's a general number, right? It can bump up to 10% depending on how much you're moving, right? A marathon runner is going to burn more calories than, you know what I mean? But the don't believe your Apple Watch, right? You did not burn.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Don't believe your Apple Watch. You did not burn 800 calories in your boot camp, Orange Theory, CrossFit, Blazing 5 workout. You know, it doesn't happen that way.
This thing is purely because I want someone to celebrate that I've gotten off my butt. That's the only reason they're
100%.
wearing.
There's nothing listen. There's nothing wrong with Apple Watches, and I could do a whole episode on that, why I think Apple Watches have actually done harm to the fitness industry, and it's for that reason why people only get. But yeah, they're a good reminder. You track your steps, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But don't believe them in terms of the calories that you burn. None of those are accurate. They're wildly inaccurate. Even the hardest hour-long cardio workout, you're topping out at 300-400 calories for most people.
Yeah.
Most people. That's not nothing, but it's not worth it. So that's your calories out. Okay. A general rule. Again, this is very global. Okay. Everybody's going to have different, again, based on the amount of muscle that you have and your activity throughout the day. But the general rule is that most people are somewhere around their current body weight times 15 or so is there. Yeah, you're going to pull the calculator out. That's about where your maintenance calories are. And again, I don't want to get too into the numbers here because I don't want us to get too particular. But if you're looking for a ballpark, that's where it is. Okay. So in order to be in a deficit, you need to be less than that number. Essentially, with the calories that you're eating within a day. And again, the reason why I don't want to get too into the weeds with the specific numbers is that 95% of people do not need to track their calories using MyFitnessPal or anything like that. Can you? Absolutely. Is it a tool? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's also not necessarily leaps and bounds better than using another method for tracking your intake. Most people, when I first start with clients, I say, keep a food diary. Just take a picture of what it is that you're eating. You remember doing this. Just take a picture of what you're eating for like a week. And what happened when you did that?
I was just more aware because in my head, you were looking at every plate of food that I put together. So A, I plated things really nicely.
Yeah.
But B, I was very aware of the portion size and of am I having vegetables and fruits with every meal. I do remember way back when I did Weight Watchers, I became almost obsessive about tracking every single little bite of food. And I think for people who may have had a history of eating disorders
100%.
or any sort of disordered, view of themselves, that made it way worse because you kind of go back into that, I'm doing it for health reasons, but you become obsessed with that instead of being obsessed with whatever disordered eating you were doing before. So tracking calories has always been a very slippery slope for me.
I think that you're absolutely right. And I want to be careful about going too far one direction or the other, okay? Because I know people who've had eating disorders where I'm like, listen, I probably wouldn't do this. Yeah. But I also don't want to go so far as, because it's gotten to the point where some people will look at somebody who tracks their calories and say that's disordered eating. And that's not that's not the case at all.
It's not.
Right? Like you track your money. Is it financial? Is it like, am I obsessive to have a budget and know how much my money is? No, but if I check my Vanguard balance 4 or 5 times a day and stress over every little uptick or downtick on my retirement account that I'm not going to touch in 35 years, that might be a problem, right? So that for me, it probably wouldn't be the best to have that on my phone. But for somebody else who's just like, listen, I just have it and I check it, make sure everything is where it's supposed to be, then it can be a great tool. But it is a tool. It is not the law that we have to do. So, and it's also not, this is where it like blows people's minds. And I don't want to like, Food labeling is one of the least regulated things in the world. People can put whatever the hell they want on food labels. Forgive my I'm drinking this, and I did a video about this, but I'm drinking this energy drink because I don't like coffee, and it says right on this, and I remember when I first did it. Where is it? It says boosts metabolism and supports fat loss.
How?
How? Because it gives
Is
you
it a
energy. You know what energy makes you do? You get up and freaking move.
move? Because you can't sit still.
Because you can't sit still. My eyebrows are going to vibrate off. I'm like sitting here twitching. I'm moving more, so I'm burning more calories. But they can say that because people with more energy move more. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can say whatever you want on food labels and just kind of be like, yeah, it's kind of right. And it's also the same is true with the calorie counts that they put on food labels. Those are plus or minus 20%.
God.
Like I've done, and I'm not going to dig into the research because nobody cares, but like there have been global studies on this. Now, they take the average, right? They're not necessarily taking like the low end for everything, though they can, right? Like nothing is actually 0 calories. We understand that.
Can't be. Celery's not 0 calories.
You can't have 0 calories, but they can put 0 calories on the food label because it's like so small that, you know what I mean? Like you can adjust the portion size too. Like it's like I looked at this last night because I was waiting in the grocery line, and I was just every now and then I'll just like pull up one of these things and get just to piss myself off. And I look and I pull up it was a king size Snickers bar. And this king-size Snickers bar has like 2 fun-size Snickers bars in it, basically, is how they do it. And so they put all of the labels on there for 1 serving size. So it's 220 calories and it's X amount or whatever. But you look all the way to the left and it says servings per package 2. So you're going to pick this Snickers bar up and you're like, it's only 220 calories. No, it's actually 440 calories, and they're probably taking the low end of it. You're probably looking at 500 calories. For this package
like
of Snickers bar, but they can
calories
manipulate this to be kind of whatever it is. So you just want to be super careful with like calling this the law, and unless you're a bodybuilder or an actor or a model where you are paid for your physical appearance and to get to a certain level, you can get to a very solid level of body composition and where 95% of people are going to be content without having to track your calories. Again, that does not mean that you shouldn't. It doesn't mean that it's not a tool. It makes it easier or simple. And I think it's worth doing if you've never done it before. It's worth doing for a period of time because it can open your eyes to some of the things like that Snickers bar where all of a sudden you read a food label and you're like, I never realized that this was the case. I think it can be a tool.
I agree. Yeah. Just like last week, we were talking about a little bit about portion size for men versus women. Every once in a while, I will use my measuring cups and measure out what the portions are. Not every meal, because that's insane for me. But like once every few months, just to see. And it's amazing how inflated your own servings get when you're just like using a spoon to scoop it onto your plate, and you're like, oh crap, I've been doing like double serving sizes without realizing it.
Well, that's a great example of that is like peanut butter on something. So like I had a client.
That's 2 tablespoons.
Serving size is 2 tablespoons, and like most people will put like 3 tablespoons on 1 piece of toast, right? Like I had a client who just started and was taking their pictures, and I looked at it and they were like, hey, what do you think? Like we're digging in a little bit. And I was like, honestly, looking at this, it might be worth like just for kicks and giggles, measure how much you're putting on there. Because I looked at it and I was like, I can see from a photo that you're heaping that on there. And it's not like, I'm not trying to dismiss that, but you can get most of the flavor of that for half of the calories if you just don't put as much of a layer on there. So sometimes it's eye-opening to what it is that we're actually eating and being aware of it. So there is value in whether it's measuring it with a scale, like a food scale. They're like $10. It's just sometimes interesting to see, or a measuring cup or tablespoons. But the other thing that we've done is use your hand, right? So there's hand portions, again, as a guide. So I'm going to do this to the screen, but if you're just listening, right, I'm going to describe this to you. But you can Google hand portion sizing. Precision Nutrition is the people who founded this. That's who my certification in nutrition is from. But the idea is, if I'm looking at my hand and trying to like get a portion size, and then you're just tracking kind of the portions of each of these, a palm, like the palm of your hand, is a serving size of protein. A cupped handful is a serving size of carbohydrates. A thumb is a serving size of fats, and a fist is a serving size of vegetables. So again, if I'm just looking at it now, what do those numbers mean? Right, that's a conversation for a different time. But if you're just looking at it and you'd be like, all right, how much is all of this, right? And again, some things are different than others. Oh, you still there? Recording continues smoothly. Live video when your internet improves. Okay. We're just going to keep this in, but this is how we go.
I'm just looking at my cupped hand, and I do this because you and I did the thing together, and it's so small.
No, we can oftentimes do more than we can oftentimes do more than we think that we can, right, with this. But it is eye-opening when we get into this, and that's the strategy I really want to get into is the density of the food that we're eating and why this is helpful. So when we're looking at a calorie deficit, I'm gonna look at how do I get my calories that I consume less than the calories that I would maintain my weight at. In other words, how do I go that direction? So the general principle for most people is to shoot for about a 500 calorie deficit a day. There's a couple reasons for this. One, that's a reasonable amount to still be able to eat and not feel wicked hungry. If you go much below that, then it can start to get like, oh, I'm really hungry, which means that it's harder to stick with it, right? And longevity is the name of the game with the calorie deficit, okay? Because you could get into like a wicked low calorie diet, but if you can only do it for a week or two, then that's going to be the extent of your progress. And then there's also the flip side of it, which is the rebound that we can get into, where a lot of people who go into extreme diets oftentimes gain everything back and sometimes even more than they gain. There's a ton of research on this, 25% more weight than they had before because they did something too extreme and they couldn't stick with it. So you're better off doing a more moderate deficit that you can stick with long enough to see results. However, you do want to do one that is enough to see progress so that you feel like you're making progress. Because if you don't feel like you're making progress, then you're going to be like, this isn't freaking working. What do I do? So 500 calories is around that number. And again, that's a little bit dependent on your size. All right. Somebody who's 350 pounds and maintains their weight at 3,500 calories could eat 2,500 calories, not be wicked hungry, and get a 1,000 calorie deficit because they also have more weight to lose than a 150 pound woman who's trying to get to 135. Right? She doesn't have 1,000 calories to cut out of her diet. Additionally, she just doesn't have the room for that. And that would be a little bit too drastic, right? She would get really hungry. And so the other idea behind this is that if you were to hit your calorie deficit flawlessly every single day, which is not necessary nor the expectation. I want to make sure that I'm abundantly clear on this. Okay? The idea that you have to hit your perfect calorie deficit every single day is ludicrous. There is no other area in your life where you have to be perfect every single day. Perfection is impossible. Perfection is a prison. You can't do it.
Just say that louder for the people in the back.
You can't be perfect with this. If you try to be perfect or expect perfection, you're going to be disappointed every single time. Every single time. You are better off. There's all sorts of research on this. You are better off sticking for about 80% adherence and giving yourself 20% of the time to not do that because you are going to, again, see better long-term results because you're going to be able to stick with it longer. You're better off, again, I'm going to do some numbers for you here. 80%, 30 days. 30-day month, let's just say 30-day month. 24 of those days you're on. That means that gives you 6 full days to not hit your calorie deficit. Now, I'm not saying totally bastardize those 6 days and eat like a teenager, okay? But you could go up to maintenance or even a little bit above maintenance on those days. And maintenance is maintenance, right? You're not going backward at maintenance. You're just staying the same at maintenance. But even if you went a little bit above, you're not totally derailing 24 days versus 6 days, okay? I'm better off doing that than if I was 100% adherent for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I'll give you 3 weeks. Perfectly adherent for 3 weeks. And then I'm like, this is exhausting. And then I take a full week off because I can't stick with it. That's 21 days versus 24 days. I don't care how you divvy it up, but give yourself the flexibility and the freedom to not be perfect with this. It is not essential to do it that way. It's also not essential to hit your number exactly right every single time. Let's say if you were tracking your calories and you were, say, shooting for 1,600 and you hit 1,625, you didn't blow your calorie deficit for the day. Are we kidding? 25 calories is a rounding error.
Yeah.
That's like one Skittle.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, you just, that's breathe, an extra 4 times and you've burned 25 calories. Like, it's just not that big of a deal. Give yourself a range if you're tracking. Have some days that are a little bit higher. So you have the days that you go like, all right, for women, again, we talked about this last time with, where you are in your cycle and just, hey, let's go up to maintenance for a couple of days for the days that your cravings are going nuts. You have a date night, right? You have opportunity, or you just have a day where you're like, I have these days where I'm just hungry. It doesn't matter what I'm eating. I'm just going to, doesn't matter what I eat, I'm hungry.
Yep, we call those the bottomless pit days.
Yeah, bottomless pit days. You just, I could eat a whole Thanksgiving dinner and be hungry again in 4 minutes. Like, there are just those days. So just let it be, right? Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, you have those days, but also on other days, it's okay to give yourself a range, like plus or minus 100 calories, 150 calories, 200 calories. So again, take the 1,600 as an example, and I'll get to the numbers here in a second, but let's just say that 1,600, and you were tracking them. Let's say that 1,600 is your number. You could have some days at 1,800 because you're also going to have some days where you're just not as hungry, and you could be at 1,400.
But you're still in deficit. Those deficits are going to
they're going to even out, and you're going to average 1,600. That's it. You're looking to average 1,600 because again, if you look at the week as a whole, I could have. Now, this is the idea of the perfect. This is the weekend disaster, right? Where I'm too tight with my calorie deficit all week, and I'm like, I'm going to hit 1,200 calories a day. All right, I'm going to hit 1,200 calories a day, Monday through Thursday, and then the weekend, I'm going to say it's the weekend. Let's go wild, and I hit 2,500, 2,800. All right, let's do 2,800 for easy math. All right, so now I'm at 2,000 as my average for the week. I haven't really made any progress. I just didn't, because 4 days versus 3 days, I'm stuck. This is where I'm at, and we're like, why am I not making any progress? Well, and then you go back to 1,200 calories. You're better off doing this. This is like when you become an adult. You remember when like you're in college and every dollar matters, and like you buy your friend like a stick of deodorant or something like that, and it's like $2 at the store, and you're like, hey, can you hit me back for that? Like, you know what I mean? Like you're
I do.
And then, or you go out with friends and you're like, all right, we're going to split the check, and it's exactly, everybody's doing the thing. And then you become an adult and you're like, it's just going to end up in a wash. Like, I'll get this one, you get the next one. Like, if we're off by $20, we're off by $20. You know what I mean? Like, is this really worth the hassle? This is the idea. Like, it's going to end up in a wash. You're going to have some days that are a little bit higher. You're going to have some days that are going to be a little bit lower. like just looking to be averaging where you're looking to be.
Yeah. I just saw a thing the other day about grown up math, like how they do like girl math versus boy math versus adulting math, and the adulting math was like we don't need to worry about splitting the check. I'll get this round of drinks. You pay for something else later on, and it'll even out.
It'll even out. It'll just end up in a wash. Like, and it's just not worth hounding people over.
Oh,
And I'll do it. Like, we have Venmo now. Like, but I'm like, don't Venmo me. Like, don't Venmo me for this. I don't care. Like,
I've started Venmoing it back. If people Venmo me,
I've done that. I'm like, just don't.
Back plus $1. I'm like,
don't Venmo me this. Like, unless it's like a substantial thing,
yeah.
or like we never see each other. It's like, all right, like, dude, I don't care. Like, I'll just get this round, and then you get the next round. Like, at some point, this is going to even itself out. If we ever like, if I go out with you and John, right, I'm going to be like, all right, when I went out and we did the Father's Day thing like a year and a half ago now, and he got like, and I got he got a round, and then I got a round, right? It was just like,
that's how it happens.
I'll get the next round. Like, who cares? Like, maybe the beer was $1 more this time. Oh my gosh, are we gonna really split hairs over the dollar? Like, if my average for the week is $16.70, like, what a week! What a terrible week I had. Like, no, it doesn't make a difference. But the
as
reason,
long as you're in deficit.
But the reason why we like around 500 is, one, for the sustainability of it, and two, for the ability to for nice numbers. If I hit it perfectly every single day for 7 days, 7 times 500 is 3,500 calories. So it's a 3,500 calorie deficit for the week, which basically is about a pound of fat. So that puts you at I'm losing a pound of fat a week. So in terms of expectations, a pound of fat a week for most people is the top end of what you are going to lose. So that means in a month, you're talking about 4 pounds. That's excellent progress. Anybody who's losing more than that oftentimes is in more of a deficit because they have more to lose. If you are closer to your goal and you cannot go into quite as much of a deficit, or you don't want to, you might be closer to half a pound. And so that would mean you'd be at 2 pounds a week. Or, for instance, you have a week in there that's a vacation, and you say, you know what, I'm not going to track my calories, and I'm not going to be a deficit over a vacation because it's a vacation, and if I'm not enjoying myself, then why am I paying all this money to go on a vacation? So you might be at, I lost 2 pounds this month, and it feels like that's not it. And we've talked about this all the time. The marketing messages are, I'm going to lose 25 pounds in 3 weeks through this butt blaster cardio thing, and it's not that. You just peed and pooped it all out. Like, it's not actual fat loss. Like, you cannot lose unless you are 350 plus pounds. You're probably not losing more than a pound of fat a week. It's just not going to be doable. Not sustainable. Like, just not doable. You just don't have the room. You don't have the room in your calories to function as a person at that point.
And think about your energy levels. There's no way to sustain activity.
No.
You have nothing that's giving you the power to do anything.
Let's take this in as an example too. 150-pound woman. Let's say that she maintains her calories at about 2,100. So she's looking for 1,600, but she's like, I want to go faster. I want that 2 pounds a week. So I'm going to go to 1,000 calorie deficit. Puts me at 1,100. 1,100 calories. If you were to eat a sufficient amount of protein, and again, I don't want to get too much into the protein, but to make this actual fat loss and not just I'm shrinking, which is what weight loss, like I'm losing weight, but you eating a sufficient amount of protein for her, of that 1,100 calories, probably 900, 800 of them are going to be 700 of them are going to be from protein. So she's basically just eating protein and vegetables, essentially. It's just fun. You got nothing. You're going to be hungry all the damn time.
And it's not necessarily about hunger. Because I know that I can get full on just protein and vegetables,
You
but I'm
can.
not emotionally satisfied
No,
at all.
you're
I
gonna be
need something.
miserable.
Yeah, I need something like salty, crunchy, and not like a vegetable. I'm talking like popcorn, like
Yeah,
something that's going to satisfy that need. So there's a whole
100%.
series of the like physically satisfied versus emotionally satisfied, and you need both of them. That's why
100%.
you need this balance of stuff that you guys talked about.
100%. 100%. So now, how do we do this? How do we get into the calorie deficit? So the generally accepted rule, were you to track your
Well, we're
calories,
40 minutes in. Let's get there.
we get there. We got it. But this is an important thing for us to understand, and all of the other things that we're going to do are also going to aid in this calorie deficit. Protein, fiber, walking, sleep, strength training, cardio, all of that aids in the calorie deficit. But some strategies here. I'm going to start with the general rule. Okay, the generally accepted number, were you to track your calories, okay, is to take your goal body weight, and multiply that by 12.
On it.
Okay. And now you don't have to, like, I don't want to get into like, oh, should I have a goal body weight, whatever. Most people, again, if you didn't listen to our episode on women, if you're a man, you should still listen to it. Most people underestimate how much they need to weigh in order to feel the way that they want to feel and look the way that they want to look, particularly when we're talking about building muscle, strength training, all of those things that we're going to bring into it. So most people think that they need to weigh 120 pounds, and they do not. All right. So overestimate this number. If you're more than like 30 or 40 pounds away from that number, then you might, that could be a little bit tricky for you to do. You might need to up that number. So again, I'm going to take a wicked common one. All right. The most common number that I get from women is 135 pounds.
Yeah.
It's like the most common number. I've trained so many moms, and most moms, like, if I was gonna do like the most popular number where women are is, hey, I'm like 150 to 160 pounds, and I'd like to be like 135 to 140 pounds.
And is it regardless of our height? Like
Well, because again, I'm being universal here because most women are between 5'2" and 5'6". That's not like, so I have some clients that are 5'11", and that number makes no sense. But like for the vast majority of women who are kind of average height, average build, were active, right? Like the prototypical mom who comes to me who has had a kid or 2 or 3 and is like, I was this before I got pregnant, and I'd like to kind of be around there again. Okay. That's kind of where it is. So that person, all right, taking 135, multiply it by 12 is 1620. So I'm going to call it 1600 for easy numbers. So this is the person that's why I use 1600, because I knew that we were going to end up going here. Because I've done this.
It's like you planned it.
Dozens and dozens of times. I didn't even remember the number, but I've said that number so many times when talking to clients. It's 1600. Okay, so they're going to maintain the weight around 2100. Again, this is different for everybody, right? Depending on their muscle mass and their level of activity and all these kinds of things. But that's about a good reference frame. There's other ways to do this, though, right? So if you were tracking, that's kind of going to be where you are. And this is maybe the point that I should have started with. If you are not losing fat and you're in a calorie deficit, then you're not in a calorie deficit. Okay? The best way to know what your number is to do this for a little bit and see what happens. Okay? Because I cannot tell you for sure this is exactly the number that Amy should be eating in order to be in a calorie deficit. Because if you were to take my current stats, where I currently am, and I were to do this number on it, okay, let's just say, for some reason, I'm about where I want to be, but let's just say I wanted to get a little bit leaner. Yeah, so this would put me at like, I would need to be at 2,000 calories to lose another 5 pounds. I could probably eat 2,500 and lose another 5 pounds. 2,400 and lose another 5 pounds. Just based on the amount of activity that I try to do in a day and my current level of lean body mass, because I strength trained for 7.5, 8 years. Okay. So my current body composition is different than somebody else at my current weight. Okay. So you can't know this for sure until you do it, try it, and then see the results. This is very much a scientific experiment. Like, let's just try something and see what happens. So this is why I say it's worth tracking if you've never done it for a little bit and see, all right, what am I eating? And it doesn't have to be every day, right? You take a couple of example weekdays, like 2 weekdays and a weekend day. And you just say, all right, this is couple stereotypical weekdays and a stereotypical weekend day. Let me just see kind of roughly what this looks like. Because most people eat a lot of the same things most days. If you don't, that's tip number 1. Eat some of the same things so that you can it just gets easier to understand what it is that you're eating. So eat some of the same things. It doesn't have to be you eat the same thing every day, but have 2 or 3 different breakfasts, 2 to 4 lunches, and 5 to 10 dinners. And you're like, this is generally what I eat. A few snacks. This is generally what I eat. And if I eat this, generally, for a bit, did I lose fat? And now how do you track if you lose fat? The scale is one number. It is not the universal number. The number one way to track if you've lost fat is your measurements. Because inch loss is fat loss. I'm gonna give credit where that's due. I heard that. I don't know if he invented the phrase. I don't think he did, but I heard it first from a friend of mine, Daniel Rosenthal. Inch loss is fat loss. So you can lose no weight on the scale, but you can lose inches and you're losing fat. So your waist, your hips, your umbilicus, which is like right below your belly button, legs, arms, chest. Those are good numbers to measure and be like, all right, did those go down every couple weeks? If those went down, I'm losing fat. So it doesn't matter how fast I'm losing it, right? I'm losing fat, so that means I'm in a deficit. Let's just keep it rolling. Now, how do we actually get to that number? We're 45 minutes in. We're cruising here. Give me 2 seconds. How do we actually get to this number? Well, we've talked about this a little bit before. And we kind of touched on it a little bit here. If I am in... I could be in a calorie deficit eating only donuts. All right? So 1,600 calories. I could have 3 donuts. 3 big donuts. Fancy schmancy donuts for the day. And I would be in a calorie deficit. If that's all I ate. I would be in a calorie deficit and I would lose weight. But the idea that I could do that for any sustained period of time is ludicrous.
Yeah.
Because I would be hungry and I would be low energy and I would be not satisfied.
Yeah.
So the idea behind being in a calorie deficit, what makes it easier to be in a calorie deficit is actually to eat higher quality foods. Whole, less processed foods. And I've said this as an example. 500 calories of a donut versus 500 calories of sweet potatoes. I could eat a 500 calorie donut and be hungry again in 30 seconds. I don't care what kind of donut it is. Maybe not a donut. That's a couple donuts. I'd be ready to rock and roll. If I ate 500 calories of sweet potatoes, I wouldn't move. Like I don't know if I could do it. Like that's like 2.5, 3 sweet potatoes. Like that's a lot of friggin' food.
It's a lot.
You're going to be full with that. So a lot of people, when they think about, all right, I'm going to get into a calorie deficit, they start at the top with, I'm going to eat less food. I'm going to eat less of what I'm currently eating. That's challenging because now you're cutting without anything I'm just restricting.
Right.
The idea is, from a mental perspective, how do I do this? I need to add food that is going to fill me up more for less calories. So we can do this by either adding or doing swaps. So add some protein. Protein is going to be super filling. Add some vegetables. Add some fruit. All of these things are going to be filling for less calories than are their more processed counterparts. That does not mean that you can never eat those things. There's everything about balance here. Like Amy talked about, like the saltiness, the crunchiness. You want to have these things that you enjoy, and that's part of it. But if you can, the way to do that is to actually have the vast majority of what you're eating be higher quality, whole foods, less processed, the perimeter of the grocery store.
Yep.
The perimeter of the grocery store, for the most part, if most of my food's from there, then I'm going to be relatively satisfied. And you're going to be like, I got 400 calories left.
Mm-hmm.
I could have a cookie.
I'm gonna have a glass of wine.
I'm going to have a glass of wine. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do with these extra calories because I'm not trying to fill my hunger levels
Right.
to get to that point because I've satisfied my hunger by eating the more whole. Like, people are sometimes astounded by the amount of food that I eat. Like, I did one day when I was doing my fat loss phase, and I took a picture of everything that I ate in the day, and people are like, "How are you eating this much food and staying in a deficit?" I'm like, I'm eating way fewer calories than you think that I am. This is the density of food. Like, there's a ton of these infographics out there. It's like, okay, you can have a Big Mac for like, and I'm not demonizing, like, if you decide, but like Big Mac for 1,000 calories, right? Big Mac and French fries and a Coke for, all of that's, call it 1,500 calories, right? Or you could have a day's worth of food.
Right.
Now, again, there's nothing wrong with the Big Mac in terms of if that's what you want to spend your 1,000 calories on, but you don't have as much room otherwise. So you want to pick your spots, and again, so the less processed something is, the more filling it's going to be. So the strategy first to get into a deficit is not to look at what it is that you're eating and be like, all right, I'm going to eat less of that. So if you've never tracked your calories, don't start by tracking your calories right now. Start by looking at track your food, like take pictures of it or keep a food log, look at it and be like, where can I get a little bit higher quality? I'm going to be more satisfied, I'm going to be more full, and that's going to naturally lead me to eating less calories overall, which is going to make it in 3 weeks or a month or something like that. Then when I go to track and see where I'm at, I'm going to be closer to my target. I don't give clients targets on anything until at least a month in. Until we've made, and you were like, when am I going to get a damn number? And I'm like, you're not going to get one until we've made progress and you feel like you're close. Because if you're currently eating 2,400 calories and you're trying to get to 1,600, you're going to look at that and be like, where the hell am I going to cut 800 calories? But if you make some changes and you're at 1,800, you're like, oh, I can shave another 200 calories off of this, no problem, by doing a couple of these swaps.
It's a lot for me. It was a lot of like actually seeing what I was eating in a day. Like, for me, it was the visual of taking a photograph, writing it down. That just didn't work for my personality. But just seeing it, I was like, oh, I'm seeing that 2 meals in a row, I had kind of like some lower quality carbohydrates, which were delicious, but did they satisfy me? Not really. So did they need to be there? Not really.
And again, you get to choose whether they are or they aren't. But if you can pick if those things are satisfying, one of the things, right? So it's not just physically satisfying, but emotionally satisfying, right? So like for me, I talk about pizza or margaritas or brownies or something like that. Do I want to have the Snickers bar? No. Like, would it be yummy? Of course it would. But is that worth?
It's delicious, but do you need it?
Would I want it? Am I going to spend the 500 calories on that and be hungry again in 4 minutes, or would I rather, if I'm going to have something that's more processed, I want it to be something that's going to make me feel like Winnie the Pooh eating honey, where I'm going to savor every single bite of this. A brownie, like a homemade brownie, or a really good margarita, or an apple cider donut, warm off the thing. Right, we're in that season right now. Like, bro, I could I'm just in another world. People are like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Just don't talk to me right now. I'm fine, but just don't talk to me right now."
When they come fresh out of the fryer,
fresh out of the thing.
Oh, there's nothing better.
So you pick your spots with this, but the idea behind less processed food is if the fewer ingredients, the less processed. There's one ingredient in bananas. It's a banana. Yeah, right? If you're looking at the back of the thing, if you're like, I can't pronounce 3/4 of the ingredients in here.
Yeah.
Particularly if the first couple ingredients aren't things that you recognize, then that's going to be a more processed thing. So the perimeter of the grocery store, fruits, vegetables, protein, stuff like that, if you can start to add that in or make some swaps. So I actually I might put this up today. I recorded a video, short little thing about like when I was going through my ice cream recovery from my dumb ice cream experiment, and I was like trying to eat wicked plain. I actually made a swap for my general lunch that I eat almost every day because it's delicious. And again, this is going back to make it simpler on yourself and have like a staple routine, because then you can make adjustments to what you normally eat, right? It becomes a lot easier to be like, I generally eat these couple of things for lunch. Then you can make adjustments to those meals versus having to come up with brand new things every time. Yeah. So I generally eat this like chicken fajita wrap. It's just grilled chicken, peppers and onions that are sauteed in a wrap. Pretty easy. I normally have been doing this like high fiber. It's like the Mission Carb Balance wrap. Right. And not because I care about, it's keto friendly and net carbs or whatever, but it's because it's got a crap ton of fiber in it. And we'll talk about this more in the other one. It's got 25 grams of fiber. And they're big. And they're 25 grams of fiber in a wrap. That's like a day's worth of fiber in one wrap. And it's 110 calories, which is like groovy. Versus I was looking for something that was a little bit plainer. So I just got the like plain white, their original wraps. And it's 210 calories. They taste basically the same. I honestly think that the Carb Balance ones taste a little bit better, and they hold up a little bit better too. The other one was like breaking apart in my hands, and I saved 100 calories. And so if you can find these things that I'm like, I can make a swap out. I can go this for this and save a couple hundred calories, whether or not it's the actual calorie number, but it's also just the quality of it, right? I can get a less processed version of this. Then you're usually going to make a lot of progress toward your calorie deficit. So it's kind of flipped on its head. People are like, I got to focus on people, the hierarchy that people oftentimes think about. And it's true in terms of what makes progress. It's calorie deficit, right? That's what determines what you weigh. Then it's the breakdown of those calories in terms of protein, carbs, and fats, and that's how you change your body composition. We'll talk about protein next time. And then the quality of the food is how you feel, how you perform, your energy levels, all of that. Oftentimes people just focus solely on the calorie deficit. Maybe they get to eating enough protein, but they don't really pay too. It's like the if it fits your macros mindset of like, I can do this while eating, dessert every day, or I eat pizza all the time and do it. And like you can, but it's harder that way. If you focus bottom up on that, if you focus first on the quality, then on getting enough protein and that sort of thing, then it becomes you like almost backdoor your way into the deficit. The you look up and you're like, I'm in a deficit. And I haven't really been trying. Like I'm not tracking my calories, but I'm doing it. A really popular thing for this is, and this is kind of where I'll finish, is a place to start is the 3-2-1 method for fat loss. So without tracking your calories, the 3-2-1 method for fat loss. 3 bottles of water a day, 2 pieces of fruit in a day, and 1 big ass salad in a day. If you start there, and you're thinking, I'm going to try to get some protein in, along with that, you're going to probably start to at least move the needle toward a deficit. Yeah.
Can I ask follow-up, how large is the bottle of water you're talking about? Is it like 16?
Again, nuts and bolts. Like,
it is a gallon. So 3 gallons.
So again, like, we don't have to get super specific on it. That's the other thing. Like we can
whatever is your standard bottle of water.
Yeah, 3 bottles of water, right? Like it could be 3 of whatever. This is the idea of where we started, and this is a good little full circle thing. We can get into the nuts and bolts of this. How big of a bottle of water? What size fruit? What constitutes a big ass salad? I don't care. Like just put some vegetables on there. Grab a piece of fruit. Drink some water. Just start. Just do something and adjust. We just picked the name Fit Parent Podcast in 30 seconds.
Yes, we did.
Right? That's what we did. We're calling it I looked. Nobody else is, at least that I found, is called the Fit Parent Podcast. I don't know how that's possible, but we're just, all right, we're going to call it that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just start. Take action. Take imperfect action and adjust versus trying to get the perfect plan. I'm going to perfectly map out my week for my calorie deficit, and then it all goes to crap on Tuesday because you had to pick up your kid at the thing and you couldn't make dinner, and then all of a sudden you have to do drive-through and you feel like you failed, and now on Wednesday you're like, all right, I'll start again on Monday. we don't have to be perfect with this. Just start, do something, make some adjustments, see where you're at, and then make more adjustments from there. Mm-hmm. But fail forward.
God, I love the permission that you're giving everybody. I think a lot of people need it, because there are those of us out there who are perfectionists, and we want to be perfect from the start. And if we're not perfect from the start, we're just going to wait until we are ready to be perfect from the start. And then how long passes before we even try?
You'll never be perfect. I'll end with this story, and then I really got to go because I'm late. But I'll end with this story. My first year of teaching, oh, geez, I can't do this short. I'm going to do it short. My first year of teaching, I helped out with the theater program's production of Shrek. They needed some teacher volunteers, and I did musical theater my senior year of high school. It was the first time I did it. And so I was like, yeah, I'll come and help out. And then one of the other teachers was like, hey, the Portsmouth rep, Seacoast rep in Portsmouth, which is the town that you live in, that I live near, is doing auditions, right? They do a 6 plays a year or something like that. Mm-hmm. Little semi-professional production thing, and they're doing one of Into the Woods. And she was like, I'm going to go audition. I was like, you should do it too. And I was like, all right, fine, like whatever. I was single, I got nothing else going on. I was like, sure, I'll go do this. And I went and auditioned. You had to have a headshot, you had to have a prepared monologue, and you had to have a prepared solo thing for this. I didn't have any of this, right? So I had a friend take a picture of me, like just on a random day. It was like black and white, versus I come in and everybody else has professional headshots, right? They got a resume, and I'm like, on my resume is senior year of high school, I was in a musical, and then I just helped out with this musical as a teacher. That was my resume. That was the extent of my acting resume. I show up for the solo song, and you're supposed to have accompanying music for the accompanying pianist. I didn't know this. I had a karaoke soundtrack that I played from my phone and sang it. And because I had just done Shrek with the kids, the song was from Shrek, and I didn't have a monologue, so I took another song and I just spoke it as my monologue. So I was double Shrek on this thing. They're like, this guy has nothing.
Oh God.
They asked me what role. I didn't know the play. I had never seen Into the Woods at the time. They're like, what role? And I was like, the baker, which is the lead role. And they're like, what resonates? And I was like, I just feel like I resonate with the baker. I had no clue what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And I got a call back somehow. And then I got a part in this. And I was in a I was not the baker. I was Rapunzel's prince. This is the best part. This was a small cast. So there was like 13 people for 28 roles. So we all had like multiple roles. It was an interesting way that the director did it. And we just had like a one costume piece that indicated what role we were currently playing. So I was Rapunzel's prince. I was one of Cinderella's stepsisters. And I was the cow, Milky White. And it went in reverse order of that for my best reviews. Like Milky White was like rave reviews for the cow, really good reviews for the stepsister, mediocre for the prince, which was like an actual role where I had a song and whatever. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no business getting into this. Everybody else, every other person in this cast, all 12 other people had a history, professional headshots, were like trying to be professional actors, like we're actors at night and like waited tables in the morning kind of thing. Like I was the only person with a quote unquote real job. This is when I was teaching. And so they were like, we want to do a daytime show. And I'm like, guys, I teach during the day. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. Take imperfect action and figure it out along the way.
Could have a rave review as a cow if you do.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get into. That's my thing. All right, I went way too long, but hopefully this was helpful for people. Again, if you have thoughts, questions, anything for either of us, you can send me a message on Instagram, Jeff Delzell Fitness. Shoot me an email, jeff@jeffdelzellfitness.com, or join the Fit and Present Parent community on Facebook. for more tips, things like that. And we will be back with part 2 of this on our next episode. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Crushed.